So now we're going to look at power and authority, which these words sometimes they might come across as a bit scary, kind of like, oh, how does this fit into leadership? But of course, leadership is all about the ability to influence others to do something. That is what power is in many ways. And authority, that's just formalized power. So, but what is your understanding of power and authority? You know, when you hear these words, what are some of the thoughts that come to your mind? Maybe you might want to press pause and jot a few thoughts down as to how do you see these terms? I'd like you to think about somebody who you consider to be a great leader, and to think about how do they exercise their authority. You know, there's Mandela or Martin Luther King, Obama, Gandhi. You know, here's some pictures of some great leaders. How did they exercise their authority? What kind of power did they use? Because they were using it, hopefully, if you're thinking of a good leader, they're using their power, their authority in a good way. How did they do it? What did that look like? What does a good use of power and authority look like? Well, you see, power can come from many different sources. It can be, there's a spectrum of these different power sources. Over on this side, we have these powers that are conferred by an organization. That, you know, an organization gives you this kind of power. So some of it is about formal position. So that's maybe the ability to distribute or to withhold resources. Could be money. It could be a nice desk. It could be a good office in the right position or something. Formal position also allows the ability to control the flow of information. And sometimes, you know, oh, I'm sorry, you can't know about this. This is above your pay grade. It's very powerful. Maybe it's the right to delegate tasks. I'm your boss. I need you to do this. There you go. That is, you know, an authority, a power that has been granted by the organization. There can also be coercion. You can also force somebody to do something, maybe because the organization gives you that authority to do it. At the other end, you have power that is personally acquired. Charisma. It's about you. It's your character. It's your energy. It could be that you have the ability to persuade other people. Maybe you have energy and stamina to just keep going when other people have dropped out. Maybe you have the ability to focus on priorities. Maybe you're sensitive to the needs of other people. Maybe you can be flexible on your path towards a fixed goal. Maybe you can tolerate a high degree of conflict. Maybe you are able to submerge your own ego in order to achieve a particular task. Any of these things, that gives you a power, an ability to influence other people, because they will look at that and they will go, my goodness, that person's still going. That person's awfully flexible. That person's very persuasive, and they will still follow. So these are things which are purely personal. Of course, there are some things which are kind of in the middle. They're a mixture of personality and organizational granted power. So it could be that somebody is well connected, you know, that people will follow this person or follow their lead, follow their instruction because they are well connected. They have the ability to open other doors, maybe for you. Maybe they're somebody who has rare and valuable knowledge, know-how. You know, this person is worth following because they know stuff that other people don't know. Maybe it's not just what they know, maybe it's who they know. Or maybe it's because they're recognized within the organization as being somebody who is going to go far. Maybe they're, you know, called a rising star. And of course, that's going to be a combination of how the organization sees them and their own personal traits. Anyway, you have all these different kinds of power, and some of them come from the organization, some of them come just from the person themselves. And this surely must get you thinking, remembering back to those 5 levels of influence. Because you remember, at the bottom level was this positional power. You know, people, they have to follow you simply because of your position, granted purely by the organization. But as you climb up this tree, so they actually become things which are more, actually they're more focused on more character and personal power rather than organizational. And it turns out that if you rely on organizational power for too long, people recognize this and they stop respecting any personal power that you may have. If you keep relying only on the organizational power, then they actually start to see whatever personal power you might have. You know, that maybe they did see you as a highly skilled, very clever, you know, very worthwhile following kind of person, but they just kept on bashing away that they are the boss and therefore we have to follow them, and they relied on their position for too long, and so actually this other personal power gets eroded away and people start to not care about it so much. So it's very important. We do have positional power, maybe from where we are within the organization, but you cannot rely on that for very long. You have to move up this scale, otherwise you actually start losing the ability to influence other people. We have to know when to apply the right kind of power in the right kind of situation. And so we have here a grid of when we can use different kinds of power. You can see that on this scale we have the ability for the control that the leader has and the freedom that is given to the group. So if we were to say, where does delegation fall on here? Well, delegation is where there's a fairly medium level of control by the leader, because they say what needs to be done, but then when you go away and start doing it, it's kind of up to you. So delegation would fall here somewhere, and freedom of the group, well, there's fairly high freedom, so delegation would be over here somewhere. Whereas, I don't know, your boss telling you what to do, where does that fall? Well, that's going to be a very high control by the leader, and very little freedom within the group, and so forth. And so you could think, where does making a suggestion, where does that fall on here? It's a little bit lower, but there's some more freedom within the group. Maybe it's collaboration, or just abdicating responsibility, or consulting. You know, and all of these different words that we use, they may fall in a different place on here, and we can kind of work out how do these different words actually function in reality. And somebody who studied this, they looked at what was called the power continuum, and they said actually all these different words, they actually can be placed on this spectrum, where at the one end things are very authoritarian, telling you how it is going to be. The leader makes the decision. There's a high degree of, it's all about authority. It's very task, it tends to be very task orientated. At the other end, very democratic, very relationship orientated. And at this end, there's a high degree of participation, very little authority at this end. And here the leader is allowing subordinates to function within defined limits. So power and authority has been delegated out, and you have a spectrum in between. So at this end, leader makes the decisions, maybe leader sells the decision. Maybe leader presents ideas and invites comments. Maybe the leader presents decisions subject to the team's approval. Maybe the leader presents problems and gets suggestions and makes decisions for the team. But maybe the leader defines limits and asks the group to make the decisions. And finally, the leader allows the subordinates to function within their own defined limits. So you have a spectrum of how power can be used. Now, what does this have to do in the practical world? Well, the fact is that sometimes we will find people who are in different places on what's called the response continuum. Sometimes they are resistant to the idea that we have put up. Sometimes they might comply with the idea that we've told them. You know, we've said, please do this. And initially they're resistant. I don't want to. Maybe you can push them to a point where they will comply and they'll say, oh, all right, I'll do it. And if you're using hard power, so that would be things which are at this end, more authoritarian, more telling them what to do. If you use that kind of hard power, you can move somebody from being resistant up to being compliant. They will do it, but they don't do it with their heart. If you want to move somebody from compliant up to committed, they want to do it because they see it as a good thing, that is only going to happen because you use soft power. So that would be using things which appeal to their heart. It's about relying on personal power rather than organizational power. And we're going to talk about organizations in the next video.